Hazard management models. There are three main hazard management models: the hazard management cycle, the park model, the pressure and release model. Each of them make connections between a hazard and the place affected by that hazard. Models identify order, general trends, and patterns. They allow deviations from the model in the real world to be highlighted. Models therefore make such deviations easier to explain. All of these models involve proactive stages of hazard management, mitigation and preparation, and reactive stages, response and recovery. They help shape our understanding of resilience, the ability of a system, community, or society exposed to hazards to resist, absorb, accommodate to, and recover from the effects of a hazard in a timely and efficient manner, including through the preservation and restoration of its essential basic structures, systems, and functions. So that's a definition of resilience put forward by the UN. Inherently, all three models are optimistic. Lessons can be learnt from the future of events. Let's look at the hazard management cycle first. The hazard management cycle illustrates 4 stages in the management of hazards in seeking to reduce the scale of a disaster. They are 1. Preparedness, 2. Response, 3. Recovery, and 4. Mitigation. Preparedness involves a community education and resilience building, including how to act before, during, and after a disaster, prediction warning and evacuation technology and systems. 2. Response. Immediate help in the form of rescue to save lives and aid to help keep people alive, emergency shelter, food and water. Recovery. Rebuilding infrastructure and services, rehabilitating the injured physically and mentally, people and their lives. And finally, mitigation. Acting to reduce the scale of the next disaster and learning from the previous. So, for example, land use zoning, hazard-resistant buildings and infrastructure. It is worth noting that the recovery stage, or the returning to normal stage, depends on the magnitude of the event, the level of development of the area affected, the level of governance of the area affected, and also the external help available. The hazard management cycle provides an easy-to-remember 4-stage sequence. It is also centred around 4 Ps: prediction, prevention, protection and preparedness. The model also features 4 Rs: response, recovery, rehabilitation, reconstruction. The model is criticised for being too generic and unquantifiable. Model 2, the park model. The park model shows how quality of life is impacted by a hazardous event, how a range of management strategies can be used over time from before the event to after the event, the importance of the roles of emergency relief agencies and rehabilitation, that different areas affected may have different response curves depending on the level of preparedness and economic development of the place affected. It is generally divided into 5 stages. Stage 1 is pre-disaster, so any modifications modifying the cause and event. Stage 2 begins at the hazardous event and involves any relief, which can be from hours to days. So search and rescue and care. It then moves into rehabilitation, which is on a timeline of days to weeks. So temporary housing, national and international help. And then it completes at reconstruction, which will be weeks to years scale. And should hopefully return the area to its previous level of development, or perhaps with improvements if disaster management planning and mitigation has been put into place, or unfortunately for some places there can be a deterioration in the quality of life if that particular area is unable to return fully to normality. The model focuses on 3 R's: relief, rehabilitation and reconstruction. All of these help the understanding of the recovery phase after an event. It is criticised for not accounting for different levels of economic development or including other issues such as social, political or environmental that may play a role. It is useful when comparing hazard events. They can have differing curves. And the pressure and release model, PAR model. The PAR model shows that the socio-economic context of the place is important. The political systems, its government, income levels, economic strength, levels of education and training, rates of population change and levels of investment in a place all impact on that place's degree of vulnerability. The nature of the hazard is also key, whether a volcano, earthquake, storm or landslide. Both the context and the hazard put pressure on the place affected. The release of that pressure comes with a reduction in the vulnerability of the place affected, which in turn often depends on the quality of governance in the place. So this model is divided into 3 sections. We've got the progression of the vulnerability, so root causes, things that are making that place vulnerable. So low access to resources, limited influence in decision-making or a poor governance system, lack of education, training and investment, rapid population change and urbanisation, and then unsafe conditions, poor construction standards, unsafe infrastructure, poverty or a lack of social safety net. And then you have your section with natural hazards in, that could be an earthquake, an eruption, a tsunami. And then a little calculation, which is disaster, brackets, risk equals the hazard times the vulnerability. So for example, the earthquake times poor construction, lack of education, poverty. And that will lead to your risk. The PAR model, pressure and release model, shows how disasters occur when natural hazards affect vulnerable people. A disaster occurs when 2 forces, socio-economic pressure and the physical exposure, interact or collide. So the socio-economic pressure being, for example, poverty, and the physical exposure being the volcanic eruption or the earthquake. All of the models show that effective governance has a significant impact on a community's resilience. So, for example, meeting basic needs is effective governance. Providing sufficient food and water for the population is crucial. Planning. Effective land use planning and zoning prevents house construction in areas most at risk. Environmental management prevents exacerbating factors such as deforestation of mangroves, which can protect against a tsunami. Preparedness. Providing education and community awareness programs can reduce death tolls. Tackling corruption, ensuring aid or relief funds and equipment are not siphoned away, ensuring correct building codes and standards. And finally, openness. Having a free press allows full scrutiny of management strategies.